Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Olson, and you are here for Civil Conversations in our storytelling series. Really, I want to introduce the host of the show, which is Wayne Hare. Hey, Wayne, how are you doing?
Greg, I'm doing good. How are you, man?
Good, good. I'm excited to have us together again and for another great
All right.
episode. And so, why don't we just kick it off? I know we like to keep things succinct as
Sorry,
possible.
guys. My
No,
phone
hey,
ringing.
that's okay, Nancy. We're going to give you an introduction here. Thanks for everybody joining us. Hey, Wayne, why don't you say hello to everybody, and then why don't you quickly do a quick introduction, and we'll turn it over to our guest.
Sure. I'm Wayne Hare. I'm retired from as a backcountry ranger from the National Park Service. 3 years ago, I got engaged. Are we good? Okay.
Go ahead, you're all right.
I'm Wayne Hare. 3 years ago, I got involved in creating this project called the Civil Conversations Project, trying to trying to explain race and where we are with race to this country. My goal really is to move people into a position where they're not opposed to the country trying to achieve racial justice. I've had so many people say, "What racism? Racism exists. It's all been fixed." I'm the founding director of this now what's become a nonprofit, the Civil Conversations Project. With us today, Greg, are Vanessa Glynn. I've known her since my days in the Park Service. Uh, she's many she's many things that are admirable. But what I want to talk about, her background is from South Philly, which evidently is an entirely different city than Philadelphia. Who knew? And she's very proud of that. Um, she's tough, so don't make the mistake of saying she's from Philly.
Okay.
But she spent I think a couple of years working in I believe Northeast Philly, which is the black section of Philadelphia, and so she came into that. She was teaching art. She came into that experience with some sympathy for the black experience, but also with kind of standard American beliefs in meritocracy. You get born, you grow up, you work hard, you become successful. The only factor there really was working hard. If you did that, you became successful. And she kind of went into that experience also thinking there are poor people across the color spectrum, kind of equally divided. There were rich people across the color spectrum, kind of equally divided. And she got into the black section of Philly, spent some time there, and realized that's not true. And our other guest is Nancy Roath. I've known Nancy for probably longer than Vanessa's even been alive. Um, for a few years, I worked in the corporate world. Nancy worked with me at IBM. She, I didn't work hard to become successful. Nancy did work hard, and she became very successful as a senior executive for one of the most prestigious corporations in the world, really. And when she retired, she was like, "Well, what am I going to do? I can't drink all day." So she decided to become involved and actually help create a nonprofit called Future Five that serves underprivileged students in Connecticut. And it's not specifically devoted to Black students, but when you say Section 8 or inner city or underserved, you're pretty much talking about people with brown skin. And she went into it kind of like Vanessa, right? With empathy, but she also came out of that experience really having her eyes open to the just the numerous and daily challenges. So they're going to talk about those challenges in an effort to help people understand that that these roadblocks are alive and well and exist, and that if we could work towards removing them, that America as a whole would end up being a better place. So that was a short introduction, huh?
Wayne, thank you for that. I keep learning things about both of you when Wayne gives introductions, and I think I want him to introduce me so my mom can understand what I do. So maybe I'll have you do that sometime, Wayne. Okay. Hey, Vanessa, let's go with you. Thanks for being on the show. We're excited to have you here, and I had to look up on a map South Philly because I think of Philly and of course Rocky movies, right? And that's people think that's everything. So it is quite different, South Philly, from what we all know. But thank you for coming on. You want to just say a couple words before we'll let Nancy say something, and then we'll get right into the show.
Sure. Yeah, I lived in Philadelphia in the 90s and had a lot of experiences as I was going to art school, working with kids in various neighborhoods, mostly in Northeast Philly, but also in West Philly, and some other outreach programs.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Hey, Nancy.
Hi.
Sounds like you're having a lot of fun now. It doesn't sound like retirement, though.
No, but I need to be busy. So I have an interesting way that I started. In 2006, I decided that I wanted to sign up to be a big sister for the Big Brother, Big Sister program.
Yeah.
And thinking that, I'll bring some fun, some ice cream and this kind of stuff to the table. Little did I know my 9-year-old girl, Roche, who's now 22, the life that she had that I was nowhere near aware of. I mean, I didn't know that when we go into CVS shopping that she's being trailed as a 9-year-old because she's probably going to pick up something, maybe some custom jewelry. I didn't, when I was upset with her of bullying in school, her mom, who I've become very close to, was like, well, you don't understand what she sees in the projects. She sees some pretty bad stuff. So this is minor. That's to all say that by the time I retired in 2009, and this opportunity to be part of Future 5 and work with low-income, under-resourced kids in Stamford, Connecticut, I kind of had a bit of a feel for it. But as Wayne and I have talked in the past, I didn't realize how just the simplest little things can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I think you're right. Today we're talking about planting seeds, right? Seeds of information, seeds of inspiration, seeds of things that we're unaware of, right? So one of the things we're talking about is and Wayne and I have had this discussion going on about systemic and institutional racism is alive and growing. And I learned so much about this, but the great effect it's having on inner cities, but throughout America, in our Black community and people of color. So Wayne, I thought we'd start there and let you kind of lead that discussion with both Vanessa and Nancy, because I think there's a lot of things happening that, that people aren't aware of, and we can come up with things and we can educate kind of our listeners in that. How's that sound, Wayne?
Whatever you say, Greg. This is actually your podcast, not mine.
You're the host. You're the civil conversations guru, my friend.
When did I become the host? You're the host. You're the host.
Okay, Vanessa, what do you guys think? And Wayne, how do you, where do we take it from there about the systemic problem of institutional racism and what we're seeing in these communities?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about what I saw. Basically, I grew up with parents who were hippies turned, Exxon engineer and lawyer, and single mom who struggled. But I was always told, you work hard and you will succeed in this country. And, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. That was my dream. And no one told me, no, I couldn't do that. And that seemed achievable to me. And then when I started working with these kids in the after school program, it was in a really rough area and it was very unsafe. These kids cannot just work harder and focus on school. I had 4th to 6th graders, and these are kids who they are working hard. They're working hard to survive because they are dealing, it's basically a war zone. And if you saw that in another country, we'd probably be sending like aid over there or something. But this is happening in the US. And these kids are dealing with an extreme amount of stress, adult responsibilities. There's often, no parental guidance around. And as Wayne mentioned, when I came into this, I was like, well, there's poor people, there's rich people. And then I started learning more about how things were set up and how real estate taxes work, and redlining, which is where back in the 30s, the US government supported not financing mortgages in certain neighborhoods, and particularly to Black people in urban neighborhoods. And all of this culminates in affecting people. So yes, you still need to work hard, but people have other challenges based on where they're born and the color of their skin. And that's something that we really need to understand. And it's something that my experiences working with these kids started to get me to look at. And if ever anyone's interested in maps of their particular neighborhood, there is a website University of Richmond has. I'm a map maker by profession, so love maps, but called Mapping Inequity, Redlining in New Deal America. And you can look up in your community, you know, what areas were redlined and mortgages were not provided in certain geographic areas. So it just opened my eyes to a lot of things. And these kids I worked with were great human beings, but they had never been to Center City, which is downtown Philadelphia. They didn't know what a carrot was. Like, you can't tell them, like, go work hard. They're dealing with watching siblings fighting off rats and roaches at night. Like, they have no heat. Like, you can't, they're struggling for food. You can't say, like, just show up at school and work hard. They're talking about dropping out of school. So we as a society really need to, like, look out for all the kids in all the communities in this country.
You know, those are really good points. And you know, how sad it is that, you know, how privileged most of us are to, you know, be able to move around, drive across town, go into grocery stores, go to the library, have internet, all these things, you know. So I appreciate you telling your story. And again, how hard it is for these kids and in these communities. You know, Nancy, you have a lot of great stories, and you know what, you know, again, here we're trying to plant the seeds and understand, and you know, and I know through your organization and different things like that, but also being a big sister, you know, what are you seeing out there in these communities? And you know, we're just trying to, again, bring that awareness to it.
Yeah, what I see very similar to what Vanessa did, and things that I didn't realize were really going on until I was met up with my little sister and saw day in, day out, even learned about Hare and what a problem that is for a Black woman. But I did learn a lot. And then when we started the Future 5 in 2009, we said, you know, what this is all about is these kids are working hard and they're smart and, you know, just haven't got the connections that they might need, whether it's resources, people, to get their full potential out of them. So that's kind of what we started with Future 5. And frankly, we went to the high schools in Stamford, Connecticut, which is a high population Black community, and said we wanted to start this program, and you know, for basically free lunch kids, right? So low income. And the guidance counselors were like, oh, whoa, what do you mean? We do that. We do that. And we said, well, yeah, you do it. You got 200 kids each, you know, that you're working with, and you got their moms that are calling in and making sure that you're doing all the right things, and particularly when it gets to the college process. And you know, your graduation rate is really not that great. So why don't you give us a little chance to kind of work with the kids? And so we started that, and turned out after like the first year, they were coming to us. We never recruited. It really was kids coming up the stairs to Future 5 and telling their friends and their family. We have at least 10 families where all 3 of the kids in their family have made it through Future 5 and graduated from college and are already now giving back. So it, you know, obviously, even in the schools in Stamford, they didn't realize that a little bit of help could make a huge difference to someone's life, to their career. And, you know, as Greg said, I've got millions of stories of people that we've helped. But the one thing that is really kind of sad is that one of our students, probably 5 years ago, lost her father and mother in her senior year. And it was really, really bright, and worked with one of our coaches to get the Torch Award at Northeastern University, which is a work study kind of school. So you do it over 5 years. She was so good in her field that she did communication. She was on the Today Show, supporting them as an intern for 6 months, on Jimmy Fallon, graduated with all the honors you can get. And do you know, last year it took her 6 months to get a job. And it was because of the color of her skin.
Mm. Yeah, that's something else. And these are really sad stories. Hey, Wayne, you have a lot of insight in how these Black communities are being marginalized and the challenges that they face, and we've had discussions around, how we started it with like, there's no mortgages, there's no services. It isn't about them working hard to get out of these communities, which is the one thing you've talked about a lot, is that it's just not putting your head down, have these kids go to the library and, and again, I'm sure there's success stories like that, but, like we talked about, racism is alive and growing, and they're constantly up against roadblocks. Maybe they get over one and there's another one. So, Wayne, what do you mean, and when you talk about this for our listeners, how these Black communities they're marginalized and such?
Greg, yeah, I mean, like, kind of what the heck is a definition of a marginalized community?
I guess when we hear this, I mean, I think this is really what Vanessa and Nancy are talking about, but there's a lot of things going on here where I'm just trying to see if you can help unpack this.
So, Greg, to be honest, I really think that Nancy and Vanessa, who have had, direct experience,
Sure.
Working in these communities, because of that, and because they came to these communities with a higher degree of innocence, maybe, than I would walk into these communities with. And so what we're really trying to do here, Greg, is help people who are like Nancy and Vanessa, who start out, as good people with a general empathy for the Black community, but also a belief that, you kids just, I mean, like, because of your situation, you just need to work a little harder, maybe, than your white counterparts. And since it's the little things, and honestly, the little things that I'm not aware of, I mean, I'm aware of the big things, right? And anybody can talk about a marginalized community without really, really knowing what they mean by saying that. But Vanessa and Nancy can talk really specifically about I mean, like, I noticed that Vanessa said they didn't know what a carrot is, and
Yeah.
that probably went over the head of a lot of people. But I'd like her to kind of talk about that. It's something as simple as what's a carrot, and kind of similar, for Nancy. I know that Nancy has had these kids over to her house, and her husband Jerry, to teach them something that we just take for granted: how to cook. So I'd like to kind of keep it kind of at that level, Greg. Just these little things that when people pretty arrogantly, oftentimes they're so a lot of times when people say to me, well, now that the playing field is level, how come the Black community isn't further ahead? And some people are sincere about that question, and others are just being sarcastic, and so if I answer, well, redlining from, that started years ago but still exists today, or if I just say racial discrimination, it doesn't dig very deep, but to say they don't know what a carrot is, that's to me anyway, that's stunning and sad. So I'd like to turn it really back, maybe starting with, going back to Vanessa to kind of explain about the carrot and other, little things like what do these kids know about getting to school, from the home to the bus and from the bus to the school, whatever it was, safely, yeah, I mean, so if we can go there and starting with Vanessa, would that be good?
I think that's great. I mean,
Sure.
again, walking in that. So Vanessa, and Wayne's right about, like the carrot. I mean, it didn't really go over my head, but it's like, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that these kids don't know what that is, right? So maybe bring it a little bit forward for us and what you saw or these kids are seeing, or they just don't have maybe that other communities or other kids in communities we might take for granted or just don't know.
Yeah, sure. So when I started doing this art program, it was 3 days a week, and I took the public Philadelphia bus up there from South Philly, and it was really sketchy. Like, I was pretty terrified going up there, and I had to walk 7 blocks to the church. And apparently the way they got the 4th to 6th graders to even show up for this is they said there was going to be snacks there. So this area, there weren't any grocery stores, forget about fresh produce. There was a kind of 7-Eleven type of place, a bodega, that sold prepackaged stuff. So, these kids weren't getting good nutrition. And so they had snacks that were prepackaged, and they were like the little peanut butter crackers and stuff. And the kids would take a whole bunch of them, and I was supposed to ration them, but I was like, take as many as you want. Like, I'll just buy more, And so I was vegetarian. I'm vegetarian though. And I had brought some carrots in a Ziploc bag one day, and I was just eating them as I was walking up to the church, and the kids were hanging out front, probably cut school, they were there early, and they were like, what are those? And I was like, they're carrots, and they were just like, why are you eating that? And I'm trying to explain to them a vegetable that grows in the ground, in the dirt, and they were just horrified. I mean, it's before Google and stuff back then, right? So like, they didn't have exposure to this stuff, even like at school on computers or whatever. If their school even would have computers now, I don't know. But yeah, they literally, most of the kids had no idea what I was eating. It was this weird orange thing, right? That grew in the ground and in soil and dirt. And they were like mesmerized by this. And they were understandably pretty standoffish. A lot of the kids, after they got to know me, they would, as it would get dark earlier, they walked me to the bus stop and they would wait with me because it was a very gang heavy area. And they said, you're going to get killed. You don't know the gangs in the neighborhood. And I was like, you're 4th to 6th graders. Like, you shouldn't be protecting me while I'm waiting for the bus. So I think all of that was kind of a wake up call for me of how different my growing up experience was to theirs. And that they had never, literally, none of the kids in my group had been outside a 10-block radius. So they live in the city where like the Liberty Bell is and things like that. They had never seen like the skyscrapers up close or anything. They'd only been in that neighborhood. Yeah. And it just really struck a chord with me. And I still think about them a lot. I'm a mom now. And sometimes when I'm, fighting for like my kids' education, I think about these kids and like, what does it matter if, my school has a gifted and talented program? Like, these kids have no safety. Like, they just want for everything in life. And I just can't imagine not ever feeling, safe. And that's just the environment they were born into. But I have to imagine that, stress, there's been a lot of studies about how stress changes the brain wiring in kids and trauma. And I have to imagine that impacts all these kids. But a lot of the kids were talking about, dropping out of school and joining the gang as like a spotter or whatever. And a couple of them talked to me about it. I mean, I don't know what advice I can give these kids, but that is their reality. And I think a lot of us in America, like, don't realize that. We see poor neighborhoods and things, but that's not we don't understand the daily experience.
That's it. Yeah. And there's probably that, I don't know if it's PSTD. I can't imagine, these young kids trying to take care of adults like they sense that, that they have to take care of people, and they sense that you just don't know, right? And they don't know I can't imagine what that must be like, so, Nancy, this kind of moves in the direction of things that you're seeing kids in high school, I mean, not graduating, not going to college, not having the same opportunities as, maybe that's right. Like Wayne's talking about, like, my dad would tell me, put your head down, get good grades, you'll get a chance to go to college, get a degree, you can be whatever you want, be an astronaut like Vanessa, go through these whole plans, and I don't have the same roadblocks, right? I don't. I knew what a carrot was. I mean, I didn't have a safety issue. I didn't have to take care of a older lady when I was young to tell her, like, I have to walk you home because it's not safe. But now you saw kids that are high school. I mean, what roadblocks were you seeing from them that they just, I imagine there's just these stories of kids that just like you, you're inviting them into your house. It's incredible.
Well, lots and lots of stories, but as Wayne and I have talked in the past, some of the very little things can make such a difference. So, for example, most of our kids have parents that might speak English. Not all of them do. They work around the clock. They typically have siblings that they're taking care of, the high school kids, and they are working their butts off at school, as are their parents, because their parents are working this hard because they want them to have a good future. That's all they care about. And the kids don't want to let down the parents. But there are so many, I don't know if I even call them roadblocks, but things that they don't have. It's just basic connections. And one example that just frosts me is one of our first years, we had a student who's a DACA, so immigrant, undocumented. Her family of 3 kids and her mom and dad were all undocumented, but so hardworking and really hard. And so the first year that the state of Connecticut said that non-documented citizens of Connecticut or of the state can now pay in-resident cost to go to UConn, as opposed to out-of-state cost, which is twice. And we were on the phone just trying to clarify that, myself and her. And they said, yeah, well, we know this is UConn. We know they passed that, but our systems aren't caught up yet. So we really can't do that. And I was like, well, wait a minute. This person is going to pay double because your IT system can't process the new law. Now let's figure out how that's going to work. And we worked through it, and by golly, she ended up getting exactly what she wanted, and they figured out a way with us. But who would have known that you could do that, right? How would they have known that maybe picking up the phone could make a difference to their whole future, let alone, twice the price? So we've got lots of those situations, and the wonderful thing is, like we say, they are so hardworking. And when we get them to work with, our connections, our resources, and it's not connections like to, companies, it's really just other people. That same young lady who now has a great job in New York was an intern at GE in Stamford, Connecticut. And at the 1 or 2 of the early summer intern meetings where they're supposed to mingle with the executives, she was the only one that was over there talking to them, the executives. And some of the kids said to her later, how come you're so comfortable talking with these people? They're older than us and executives. And she said, oh, I don't know. I guess that's what I've been doing the last 2 years. So through all the connections at Future 5, we have over 90 coaches, every walk of life. And they get one-on-one coaches for college and some for job prep and all these things. So she just kind of, by osmosis, kind of picked this up, that none of the other kids, that weren't in Future 5 were going to be that comfortable, because they just learned a lot just from being connected with other people.
Nancy, let me elaborate or ask you to elaborate upon that a little bit, because one of the obstacles that you read about for younger Black people to get employment, good employment, is connections, right? It's not at all uncommon for a white person to, through their parents or just through their own, have people that might say, hey, I can help you out. I know somebody here, or I know somebody there, call this person. And so you were just talking about jobs. And so
I can talk about that, yeah.
Could you talk about a couple of things, Nancy? One is like a really, really rudimentary level of choosing a college and applying for a college. Did you find differences in the Black community versus the white community. And then when they got through college, or maybe it was just high school, I'm not really sure, did they face challenges? Would having contacts been useful to them? Did they or didn't they? So can you kind of address those and speak to those two things, Nancy?
Yeah. Part of what we do at Future 5 is help the kids connect to their career, their college that they want, to the community. So we are very involved with Stanford and Stanford businesses, and mainly because they also want to have their teams volunteer and work with us. So we have a program that we do every year. It's called Job Prep, and we work with the local, businesses. They do a lot of soft skills, how to, just walk into a room and introduce yourself. Our kids have the best handshakes in all of Stanford. But we also link with them on, just shadowing them over like the April vacations. So that's happened over the years. And I would say that maybe, I don't know, 20% of the kids that graduate from college through Future 5 get jobs in some of those companies. And my favorite one is one of our students graduated from UConn, and Indeed, the job place is in Stanford, and she works there. And she's been getting jobs for other Future 5 kids that have graduated because she kind of knows how to work with Indeed. So there's just, those simple connections of the example of the college process. The college process is it's often for us, it was 2 years for our kids, but a full year of every week doing the different steps, whether it's the Common App or the essay or the federal money that you can get, because most of our kids will get the maximum Pell Grant, but they don't know how to do those things, right? So and by the way, I didn't either when I started, but we've got over now 10 years of coaches who really know what are the good schools for diversity. We don't want our kid, just because they're smart, going off to an all-white school, right? So we've learned so much, and the little problems that you can run into and how to solve them, that we're just, every year we've got more and more kids getting into 10, 20 schools with scholarships, because we have someone that is full-time identifying scholarships that our kids can apply for. 2 years ago, we had one of our young ladies who was a nursing student at Fairfield U, and she had so many external scholarships in addition to the merit scholarship that Fairfield University was giving her. We met with the financial aid office before her freshman year to say, what are they going to do with all this extra money, $30,000? They said, well, once your bills are paid, we're going to send you a check, all right? So, but would they have been able to figure out where to do all those scholarships? And, so that this level playing field doesn't really exist, I guess is what I'm saying. And I'll tell you, you see these kids work so hard, be so appreciative, and then come and give it back to other kids. One of our boys just graduated from RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, has a great job as a structural architect in American Tower. And the first 6 months he was on the job, he looked into the opportunities there in foundations and applying for money. And he basically wrote up a grant request for Future 5, and we got $10,000 from that company because of his talking about how important it was to him, where he is now as a result. So that kind of stuff, we're not just doing things with these kids, we're teaching them, and they're now doing them, which is really, really wonderful.
And that's some really good stuff, Nancy. I appreciate very much you bringing that out. You mentioned, the phrase level playing field, and really, I think that's really what we're talking about. Again, I think I said I've had way more than one person say, well, now the playing field is level, how come y'all aren't doing better? A very wealthy middle-aged white guy used as proof of how level the playing field is all the Black athletes, and I kind of turned that around and used that as proof of exactly the opposite. When kids have been interviewed, well, first I asked, a lot of Black athletes, how many Black coaches are there? How many Black owners? How many Black managers? how many black sports reporters are there? Tell me how level the sports playing field is again, please. But I was wondering, Vanessa, if you could talk to us a bit about exactly that level playing field. Like what other things that aren't, I mean, the big things make the news, right? But what other subtle things that gave a lie to the myth of a level playing field did you see and deal with in your time there?
Yeah, I think just, again, like I really went into it thinking everyone starts here, right? And that's not like, I would just appeal to everybody. People start here and people start here. And some of the reasons they're here and here does have to do with the color of their skin. And in Philadelphia, there's a lot of history in the city of various things. And some of the other things that I saw were just, I mean, I think the most striking to me was how foreign their existence was compared to my childhood or my kids now, their childhood. And just the things that we stress about and worry about. And these kids are literally like, where am I going to get my next meal? I'm really cold at night because we don't have heat. Like just basic stuff that I really didn't understand the depth of in this country, and how things that happened decades ago are affecting the kids today and continue to. And by us not opening our eyes to that and acknowledging that there are differences depending on what you're born into, like, and I'm not trying to put down anybody's hard work. That's not the point of this, or make anyone feel guilty, because that's not helping anything. But I do think it's important for us not to all just be in our little bubble, and to, like, again, going back to the carrot, like how many kids do you know who are in 4th to 6th grade that don't know what a carrot are?
I don't know any.
I don't.
Like,
I mean, yeah.
I think one thing that I think made it very visible to me now is the whole COVID thing. And, my husband and I have our little house that we worked hard, got lots of land, it's beautiful. And my friends, my little sister, her family, they're all quarantined in a house with 3 bedrooms in downtown Stanford with, 1 TV. I asked her in March if she was okay internet-wise so that her kids could do learning from home. And she said, "I'm so ashamed, Nancy, I can't afford it." So, we did that. But I mean, let's just imagine, being quarantined for 7 months in a house with, there was a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6th grader, and then Roche, who's 22, and mom, and another sister. And they're all, and they work their butts off, both daughters and the mom. The mom works 24 hours a day practically, and because she just does. But it's just such a different experience that we just can't, COVID just compounds what it must really be like living in the Black world.
Nancy or Vanessa, have you figured out something I have not been able to figure out? And that's a succinct way of when somebody says something like, those people, now that the playing field is level, those people just need to work harder and take personal responsibility for their situation, their actions. And you may not have an answer, but if you do, I'm going to write it down because it would help me in what I do. But do you have a succinct way of responding to those people, or is it like me? Is it like a 7-hour long conversation?
well, there was that something going around on social media where someone explained about, like, it would be like the game of Monopoly where you don't get your $200 for 10 rounds, and then you're like, well, why aren't you buying properties? Why aren't you doing as well? How can you be expected to when it's just so so uneven, and so many things have been stacked against folks for so long. And it's not logical to not acknowledge those 10 rounds of not getting your $200 when you pass go, you know? And that kind of analogy, I think, helped some of my friends that I was talking to. So I don't know who said it, but I saw it floating around social media, which I know Wayne's on regularly. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a different board game, Vanessa, right? I mean, we're not even playing the same board game. And I think that's the part that we're having this discussion is that how do we get people to acknowledge that there's differences? If we simply acknowledge, right, Wayne and Nancy, that there's a difference. I mean, that's, I think we've been talking about here, that people don't really acknowledge or understand that there's a difference, right? And I think that's what's happening, you know. So when, you know, those people, I guess, you know, Nancy, I'll let you answer, you know, how do we respond to that? I mean, I don't have an answer. I mean, I think I've learned a lot meeting Wayne, and I don't know that, I don't think I've ever had that discussion, or Wayne's heard those come out of my mouth, but I've had to have colleagues or people I know talk about, you know, things like that, right? And I've heard it more like, yeah, we really want to help those people, right? And to me, I'm like, well, who are we talking about? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know how to answer that either. And I think if Wayne was trying to talk, it would be a 7-hour discussion, because we are
Let me
trying
tell
to,
you what we say.
yeah,
We meet them where they are, all right? Whether it's a freshman in high school or someone now at college. We don't meet them where we think they should be. We meet them where they are. And then, like kind of water following on a stone, you know, it builds and builds and builds. And what they need is some confidence, some support, some encouragement. What I found is our kids, I call them our kids, but they have grit, because as Vanessa said, they live in a war zone, some of them, not all of them, obviously. But what they struggle with in terms of, you know, financial support, taking care of the siblings. Just one story, one of our boys last year from Ecuador got accepted into grade school, full ride, and he chose to stay home and go to UConn in Stanford, because his parents really can't speak English, and there's some immigration issues, and he needs to be there to translate for them. So, I mean, we don't have those choices, right? There are some very, very difficult things that our kids work through, and the grit and persistence and our support of them in every little step of the way, right? Constant little steps makes a real difference. And it's kind of exciting because we're seeing come out the other end, our first 4 years of kids who started with us, went to college, and now they're out in the working world. And it's phenomenal what that little bit of support and resource and connect to this person or that makes such a difference to their confidence.
I mean, I wish it all seems, when Nancy, the way you talk about it, it seemed easy, right? In the sense that when we talk about this, and it's not at all, right? These systemic problems we're having, you know, with racism and the different programs. And, you know, like if I came in and Wayne and I were young kids and we're coming into a program, I feel like we'd be given different board games that were packaged up the same, but then we'd go down 2 different hallways, and then how I would pop out the other end, you know, and then Wayne would not even get a chance to get through the maze, right? If we were young kids, you know, and I don't know if it matters if I live in Denver or if I live in South Philly. I mean, probably, of course, different parts of the country, you know, but there's so many differences here. And again, I don't know. I mean, Wayne, I guess, Wayne, do you have a short answer to those people, or do you have a answer to, if I was to say, like, tell me what the differences are, like, how do I, or what would you want Nancy, Vanessa, and I to say? I guess I'm just curious in your mind too, like, you know, that there are differences. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
You know, I don't have a short answer, and it's, you know, it's so frustrating to me personally to hear that question asked, you know, or hear that opinion expressed. And it's, you know, I was kind of hoping, I kind of like the board game analogy.
Yeah.
But
well, there are no differences. That's what we're bringing up here, that I'm just saying, like, I don't even, and Vanessa, you brought it up, is like, there's a different board game and we don't even know that the person's not getting go around 10 times, right? I think that was a great analogy of that. I mean, now we don't, I mean, we should know. Like, we're talking about it because we know, but other people don't know those differences, Wayne. And I think that's the struggle, right? That we're trying to get across.
I mean, one thing that people can kind of pick up on is think about when you're driving around and how neighborhoods are structured, right? I mean, some neighborhoods are integrated with people of all different skin colors and ethnicities and, you know, pretty mixed neighborhoods. But a lot of times there's some separation when you're driving around. And again, that goes back to the history of how mortgages used to be distributed in this country. And that goes back to who decided that schools were going to be funded based on real estate taxes. Like, why is that even a thing? I don't know. There's a lot of different intricacies in different systems across America and across our society, where we really do stack the deck against different groups, particularly people of color.
Yeah.
Well, and let's look at what's happening right now, trying to change the census so that immigrants don't get counted. And therefore the money doesn't go to the school, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, it's still happening for sure.
Hey, Wayne, what was the city? We talked about this maybe on a few episodes ago, that they, back in, I don't know, I might have the dates wrong, 60s, 70s, 50s, they built the highway around the Black community and kind of cut them off.
No, we weren't talking about a city. We were talking about every city.
Okay.
That I mean, and that's,
I thought there was one city that brought up in these discussions, but that's a perfect example that I learned early on, right? That that was cut. So tell me about that. I mean, I think that's a great point. Just this light bulb went off with Nancy and Vanessa talking. So you're right about a lot of cities have done this.
Well, it's been suspected for decades that the federal government intentionally built freeways through Black communities, and the architect of America's freeways died fairly recently ago. I want to say, I mean, fairly recently being, you know, I mean, I'm old, so maybe fairly recently being maybe 15 years ago. And sure. But before he passed away, he just kind of said, "Yeah, we did that." And the current director of the Federal Highway Administration has apologized several times for doing that. So that being, in fact, the Federal Highway Administration had a term for building highways through Black neighborhoods. They called it getting rid of Niggertown. So it wasn't just one city. God willing, that would have been awesome. And so you can go and see that right now, right? You can go into a Black community that's near an interstate. You can drive up to the end of a street and just boom, it ends, you know, because there's a freeway or there's a concrete barrier. On the other side is the white community. And so the Federal Highway Administration dismantled something like a million Black residences. And, you know, they didn't say, you know, we're going to take this down, but we built someplace else for you. They just said, you know, like literally, the bulldozer is going to be here in 30 days. You have to be out. Goodbye. And so I don't know. I mean, what do you say about that?
There's a difference. That's the part I'm talking about. There's so many stories that I've had through this show, Nancy and Vanessa, and that's just one that you both have lived in or lived next to or experienced families and youth that are living in these communities. And Wayne, the light bulb went off. I want you to know I do listen to you. You know, so
that's the first mistake.
Yeah, I know, but that's a good example of it. Of that, can we acknowledge that there are differences and why they are? And this has been going along. I mean, been going around for a long, long time. Which created these issues. I mean, wouldn't you say? I mean, Wayne, I'm just trying to I'm bringing back things from our past conversation. So thank you for clarifying when my memory. So these are the kind of key points. As we get through, we're kind of winding up our time. We will have you both back on the show again. These are, I mean, I know I could keep asking. I know Vanessa had more stories, and same with Nancy. You're two amazingly caring people that can really have shined a light on the experience. Is there one or two things you want to leave our listeners with? I kind of like to, put things top of mind for people as they listen to this to kind of come back to something.
Yeah, I think I would just appeal to everybody, but especially parents, to kind of, as you're thinking about everything going on with school and COVID, and everybody's been making choices recently about virtual, in-person, hybrid, and things like that, to really think about if you were dealing with this situation in somebody else's shoes, right? So those kids that I worked with, in the 90s, in those neighborhoods, I know one of the sports teams in Philadelphia did buy tablets for all the school kids in Philadelphia in the public schools, but then they had some issues with getting internet. I think the internet company there helped out. But just as humans and as parents, if we could think a little bit more about, take a moment to think about how lucky we are, and then also what can we do to help this be the norm for everybody in this country, right? I think sometimes we operate from this mindset of I have to have the best for my kids, and there's the scarcity model, and there's plenty in this country. Let's help each other out, and let's figure out how we can break down some of these obstacles that people face. But first, we have to acknowledge them.
Yeah, that's really good points. Thank you for that. Nancy?
Yeah, I obviously agree with everything Vanessa said. The one thing that I think is important is really the power of connection. And I don't mean connecting to someone at IBM so you can get a job. It's connecting to resources. It could be a friend, it could be someone else, but they connect, and they're connecting to adults, not just necessarily the gangs, right? I mean, so every one of those connections is valid and makes such a difference. And what we've seen over the 11 years is how hard our kids and their parents work. And with a little bit of support and a little bit of, direction this way or that, they are so happy and grateful for the support, and to the point where the wonderful part is they are now giving it back, which is really, really wonderful.
And I like that a lot. We've talked about your C's. We have Connects, which has their 3 C's, where we're this show and is about community, collaboration, and connections, about really telling stories to try to get people to get involved in their community, wherever they are. Hey, Wayne, any closing remarks that you want to pull this all together? I know we can go down many paths with this discussion, so I appreciate you helping the 3 of us stay focused today. So thank you for that. But, we've talked a lot about these differences. We've talked a few things. We planted tiny little seeds, but I wanted to see if you had any closing remarks.
Well, Greg, as I've said to you, maybe even during this podcast, that it's such a complex issue. Yeah. And it pushes so many buttons for so many people. It's just damn hard to talk about in a way that gets people's attention. My goals are pretty low. I think that one of the most destructive or most difficult hurdles to racial justice is just getting America to accept that racial justice so far it doesn't exist. And the other hurdle, and I don't know, this is something that I kind of just feel in my bones, but I haven't found a good way to express it, is that racism is just as that racism is just really damaging to the country overall. So if you live in this country, regardless of what color you are, you're negatively affected by it. I can talk about the $1.5 trillion that people that are, like as smart as Vanessa and Nancy have figured out that if we could eradicate racism would add to the economy. I mean, $1.5 trillion. There aren't any problems we couldn't solve if we had an extra $1.5 trillion kicking around every year. But that doesn't seem to grab at people. But I might just say, most of us every day we get up and we read a newspaper or two. My question would be, how does that make you feel? Does that make you feel good? And start taking note of how many of those things that you read, maybe either on the surface or maybe under the covers a little bit, have to do with race. It would just be a good thing, for you and everybody if we kind of just tamp it down quite a bit and move forward.
Yeah, those are great points, Wayne.
I really want to thank Nancy and Vanessa for being here today and sharing, some pretty personal stuff. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to thank both of you. Wonderful for your involvement in caring and sharing stories. And again, these are the seeds we'll keep planting. Wayne, you're doing a great job. Thank you for all you're doing too. With that, I'm going to close out the show, and I wish you all well.
Thank you.